Okie dokie, here we go again. From a Blanket Fort recording studio in a one-bedroom apartment in North Hollywood, this is People Pleaser. I'm Austin Archer, and today we are going to be talking about the immeasurable value of a free press. A free press. Is a free press something that costs nothing? No, that's not what that term means. Freedom isn't free. If you've ever seen Team America World Police, you know that.
Freedom costs a buckle.
But it's true. Freedom, there's a cost to living in a quote unquote free society, to having access to a free press. It doesn't mean that it costs you nothing. It means that the press is free to express their opinions about what's going on in the country and indeed the world. That the press is free to speak their minds. This isn't breaking news or anything. You're no doubt already aware of this, but recently Stephen Colbert went on The Late Show on CBS and said this.
Paramount paid Donald Trump a $16 million settlement over his 60 Minutes lawsuit. As someone who has always been a proud employee of this network, I am offended. And I don't know if anything will ever repair my trust in this company. But just taking a stab at it, I'd say $16 million would help. Unlike the payoffs from ABC and Twitter, Paramount's settlement did not include an apology. Instead, that's good. Instead, the corporation released a statement where they said, "You may take our money, but you will never take our dignity. You may, however, purchase our dignity for the low, low price of $16 million. We need the cash."
And then this happened.
Before we start the show, I want to let you know something that I found out just last night. Next year will be our last season. The network will be ending The Late Show in May. And yeah, I share your feelings. It's not just the end of our show, but it's the end of The Late Show on CBS. I'm not being replaced. This is all just going away.
Kind of crazy. It's kind of like it's sort of insane to imagine a show like that getting canceled. It's like Saturday Night Live getting canceled, or just like the CBS nightly news getting canceled. Like, it's just these late night talk shows, Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, they're part of a long-standing tradition that feels like it's been a part of the American culture for so long. It's sort of hard to imagine television existing without them. Now, we could make an argument that television itself, network television, has been on its way out the door for a long time. So who really cares if one of these long-standing shows gets the boot a little early, because the transition has always been funneling toward nothing being network broadcast television anymore and everything being streaming. But that's a whole different conversation. It still means something that Stephen Colbert did what he does. He spoke out against, the Trump administration and clapped back against his parent company for kowtowing to them. And he was immediately punished in a way that feels, if it's not raising alarm bells for you, it absolutely should be. Before I get too far into this, I want to be transparent at the top of the show here. I am going to be talking about what happened to Stephen Colbert. I'm going to be talking about PBS and NPR. I'm going to be talking about the Trump administration's attack on the free press and their attempt to shape the narrative to give them an easier path toward the fascist authoritarian takeover of our country. But I'm also going to be talking about Patreon. And I'm going to be talking specifically about my Patreon page and something I'm doing with my Patreon page. And I want to be transparent about that at the top of the show so it doesn't wind up feeling like I'm doing some scummy thing where I'm sneaking in an ad for my paywalled content into this video about like why it's so important that you should support the free press. I want to be straight up that included in this episode of the podcast is going to be a pretty overt pitch for my Patreon channel. And I always do a pitch for my Patreon channel on every episode of the podcast. That's just kind of the name of the game when it comes to professional content creation. There's always a call to action at the end of the episode. But this episode's different because it's actually going to be a significant part of the content and the substance of the episode. And I just want you to know that up front. I just don't want to be pulling any punches. But let's keep talking about Colbert and what happened here. If you're not fully aware of the totality of the situation, Donald Trump has been suing CBS for a while now over an interview that they did with Kamala Harris during the 2024 election cycle, where he says they disingenuously, dishonestly edited her video to make her seem more competent than she actually is. So what he's alleging there is that the press was making his opponent look more competent than she actually was, and conversely, making him look bad in the process, and that wasn't fair, that they were putting their thumbs on the scale of the election somehow. You can look into this. You can look at the full clip and the edited clip and decide for yourself whether you think what 60 Minutes was doing rises to the level of, journalistic dishonesty or, somehow kind of creating dishonest propaganda in favor of the Harris campaign. In my personal opinion, what 60 Minutes did with this Kamala Harris interview is pretty standard boilerplate editing every network that does interviews with high profile personalities does edits like this. What happens is Kamala Harris is asked a question. I believe the question was about Israel and Palestine, and about, America's relationship to Israel, and about, sort of how she would go about handling that policy and that question. And she starts off with an answer that takes her a while to get into it. She's sort of fumbling and struggling to articulate a solid answer. But at some point, she sort of like the rubber hits the road and she gets going and she says something more succinct. And all they've really done, and I think that's what the question is, if I'm remembering correctly. I might be misremembering. It might have been a question about immigration or something. It's some kind of policy like that was big in the 2024 election cycle. But all they've really done is just cut out the part where she's sort of stumbling over herself and just gotten to the part where she actually answers the question. And this is actually just like a very normal thing for networks to do when they're interviewing high-profile people. It just isn't very good television to keep in every single or thought process or stumbling part of a person's attempt to get at when I have guests on my show, I do this. When I have guests and I ask them a question and they're first trying to formulate how they want to answer the question, and while they think about how they would like to formulate their answer, they sort of get the motor of their mouth running to, in the ramp up to their answer. And once they get to the meat of the substance of their answer, I'll often just edit out the first part and just put in the actual answer, because it just makes for an easier listening experience. It just makes for a more streamlined conversation. I even do it to myself. I go back through this entire, I do a whole long unedited version of the podcast that only my TikTok digital studio audience gets to watch. And then I go back through and I cut out ums and likes and spaces where I'm thinking or spaces where I stumble. And I try to make it all feel smoother, not to make myself look more competent or more eloquent than I actually am, but more just to produce a smoother piece of content overall. Just a thing that feels a little bit more high quality and streamlined and succinct and easier to follow. And in my personal opinion, that's all 60 Minutes did with this Kamala Harris interview. I think it would be journalistically dishonest and lack integrity if what they had done was gone in and basically changed her answer. If the answer that they aired was an answer she was giving to a completely different question, and they took that answer and put it after this other question because it made her answer seem better than the answer she actually gave, if they were just straight up lying on her behalf and pretending like her answer to the question was something other than what it really was in reality, that would be dishonest. That would be them tampering with the official narrative of what her actual policy and position on whatever issue she's being questioned about is. But that's not what they did. They just cut out the part where she's sort of figuring out how to word her answer and just got to her answer. And Donald Trump has people do this all the time on his behalf. Fox News does this all the time for Donald Trump. It's not uncommon for news outlets to be interviewing someone, you know, in a setting where it's like a pre-rolled interview, a pre-taped interview. It's not live, and they have to comb through and go, okay, on that part, they had a lot of pork in their answer, but the answer is in there. Let's just trim around the pork and just get to the part where they say the answer. In my opinion, there's nothing really dishonest about that. The only thing that the viewer is being deprived of is the opportunity to see Kamala Harris like struggle with her answer for 5 to 10 seconds before she gets to it. And I guess that's something where people could be like, oh, it was hard for her to answer the question immediately. But that's just how human beings' brains work. Sometimes someone is like, I know the answer to this question, and right now in this moment, I'm going to have to sort of awkwardly ramp up to it. Honestly, when I go back through and I edit this podcast, I always think that I've said what I wanted to say in a much more streamlined way than I actually have. I'm always surprised at how often I unnecessarily repeat myself. I'm always surprised at how often, you know, I find a whole section where I'm like, oh, I could have said that in such a simpler way. I'm doing this off the cuff, live, and it's hard to self-edit on the fly. I don't think it's evidence of incompetence or that someone is like dumber than they actually are. But yeah, that is the gist of what the Trump administration and Donald Trump's lawsuit with CBS and with 60 Minutes was about. So journalistic integrity would usually, in most cases, they would just say, get fucked. Like, this is a case that they could have won in court easily. They could have gone to court and just been like, this is a very normal thing that happens in lots of interviews. We have evidence showing that this has happened for Donald Trump, that our network has done this on behalf of Donald Trump several times. This is a totally normal thing. It's not like we changed what the answer to the question was. We just trimmed the parts out that were sort of the fat around the answer to the question to make for a more streamlined viewing experience. Because again, the show is 60 minutes. There's a time limit to the show. So let's say you do a 2-hour long interview or a 3-hour long interview. You've got to edit it down to fit inside of the time limit allotted to you with commercial breaks so that you can have that's just how the show works. There's a scripted portion of the show that the hosts do, and then there's an unscripted portion of the show when they're interviewing people, and they have to edit the unscripted version of the show. This is a lawsuit they easily could have won. They easily could have just shown, like, there was nothing done here that was deliberately dishonest. The problem is the Trump administration controls the FDA right now, and the FDA is overseeing the merger between CBS and Paramount Plus. Basically, the FDA was just saying, we will hold up that merger and not allow that merger to go through if you don't settle this lawsuit with us and pay Donald Trump $16 million. If you don't give him money and give him a bribe, we will just make it so that you can't go through with this merger, which again, like, massive fucking conflict of interest. There are all kinds of problems with the current regime that's in power in the White House, namely the fact that Trump went about making sure lots of different arms of the government and cabinet members were going to be loyalists. The problem with Trump 1.0, Trump 2017 to 2020, is that he had too many people in the government who weren't loyal to him. So, I mean, he tried to make the director of the FBI, James Comey, loyal to him. James Comey has testified that Donald Trump asked him to dinner at the White House and said, I need you to be loyal to me. And James Comey said, I can't do that. I'm, one of the head directors of the DOJ. It's my job to not be loyal to either political party. I have to be loyal to the justice system. And if the president commits a crime, I have to be able to investigate that crime. And so what President Trump did is he fired James Comey and called him a snake and called him like a traitor, And then James Comey was like, he literally fired me for telling him that I wouldn't be his lapdog, which, the president of the FBI should not be the president of the United States' lapdog. But Trump 2.0, they deliberately went about, in the years that Biden was president, they deliberately set out a plan to fill their inner ranks with loyalists at every level. So at all these different government institutions like the FDA, not the FDA, not the Food and Drug Administration. I've been saying the FDA. The FCC, sorry, not the FDA, the FCC, but the FCC is controlled by the Trump administration, and there's lots of different arms of the government right now that are supposed to be politically neutral, that are not supposed to serve either political party, the Democrats or the Republicans, that are not supposed to have political bias, that currently have heavy political bias and are literally controlled by the Trump administration. And this is a massive threat to our, the freedom of our press. And it's obviously not just Stephen Colbert. Obviously, NPR and PBS, their funding has been, it's official that they are, signing into law that they are going to defund those organizations, those long-standing institutions that, I think PBS and NPR for a long time have been two of the news organizations with the most integrity of any news organization in America. And it's because a good amount of their funding, yes, is government subsidized, but also a good amount of their funding comes from their viewers, that they are beholden to the funding of their viewers, and that they make funding that is public, they make content and news that is publicly funded. And if you've ever followed PBS or NPR, you've definitely seen them doing pledge drives and asking their viewers and asking their listeners to contribute. And, it's important for news outlets to have multiple streams of revenue and not just be government subsidized, because if the government can just turn off certain outlets, that's a huge problem. It's a huge conflict of interest, and those outlets need to be independently operating so that they can continue to push back against the levers of power and speak truth to power and question power. But this was always a part of the plan of the Trump political reign from the very beginning. Starting off by calling all of the news fake news, coining that phrase from the very beginning of his political era was always, it was always part of the long game. I've made this allusion on this podcast several times. There's virtually no difference between fake news and Lügenpresse. Lügenpresse is what Hitler would say about the press, and what it translates to in English is lying press. Fake news, lying press. The idea is you start by getting millions of people in the country to distrust the press. You start by sort of poisoning the well of believing in the concept of journalistic integrity. And you start by getting everyone to believe that anything that is mainstream media, anything that is funded by moneyed interests can't be trusted, and that the news regularly deliberately misrepresents information and lies, and that they can't be trusted. So you get people to distrust the news, you get people to dislike mainstream news, so you get popular sentiment around the idea that the news is bad and that journalists are bad and that reporters are bad. And then when you start coming for their jobs and you start dismantling the mechanisms through which they disseminate information, people are more willing to go, well, good. Yeah, that's all what he said. He was going to drain the swamp, and the swamp is those bad guys over on the news. So he's doing what I elected him to do, not realizing the absolute massive existential threat that poses to a functional free society, that in order for people to still be able to have the intellectual, psychological wherewithal to resist something like the rise of an authoritarian fascist state, there needs to be access to solid, reliable, good information on a regular basis. It can't be overstated what a huge problem this is, that this is, again, it's like everyone, when he first started saying fake news, there were a lot of people saying he's setting up plans to start taking away access to different forms of information. In his first administration, when he started floating the idea of banning TikTok, it was because he knew he was not popular on TikTok. He knew that TikTok was a platform where a lot of anti-Trump, anti-conservative sentiment and, progressive sentiment was really popular, and a lot of anti-Trump, anti-conservative sentiment was really popular, and it was in a way that he couldn't really control. And so he starts making it about how, it's this foreign controlled company and they're stealing all of your data and you're giving all of your data to China and they're spying on us. But really what it's about is a coordinated effort to build a narrative brick by brick wherein you can take away these outlets for disseminating information, these outlets for communication, these outlets for, us to stay in touch with each other and build community with each other. And it's about, stripping away everything that shapes the cultural narrative except for your loyal cult members, the people who are going to push the narrative that you want pushed. It's always been a part of the plan, and we are seeing Stephen Colbert's show getting canceled, NPR and PBS getting defunded is the progression of this plan in real time. It's confirmation that this is happening, that this is no longer something that we're just looking at as a possibility down the road and that people are maybe being a little bit overblown or a little bit alarmist about. It is currently taking place. It's always been the plan to replace reliable journalism that has integrity with sycophants and loyalists. And you see this with the current state of the White House press room, which is an absolute disaster and joke. There has never been in the history of the United States a press room that is this sycophantic, that is this overtly, outlandishly committed to shaping a propaganda narrative in favor of the president. We've got people in the White House room saying things like this.
Will you guys also consider releasing the president's fitness plan? He actually looks healthier than ever before. Healthier than he did 8 years ago, and I'm sure everybody in this room could agree. Is he working out with Bobby Kennedy? And is he eating less McDonald's?
I mean, that's just ridiculous. Just absolutely pathetic, especially considering the president's viral cankles that we all witnessed recently. And now they had to come out and actually officially diagnose the man with cankles. But yeah, people in the press room going, oh, he's so hot. He's so good looking. How does he stay so fit? And they've got Tim Pool in there doing shit like this.
Many of the news organizations that are represented in this room have marched in lockstep on false narratives, such as the Very Fine People hoax, the Covington smear, and now what's being called the Maryland Man hoax, where an MS-13 gang member adjudicated by two different judges, I believe, is just simply being referred to as a Maryland Man over and over again. Now, in an effort from the White House to expand access to new companies, you've created this new media seat. So I'm wondering if you can comment on, following this expansion, you've had numerous outlets disparage the companies that you've had sit here, as well as the reporters. I'm wondering if you could comment on the unprofessional behavior, as well as elaborate if there's any plans to expand access to new companies.
And honestly, that's embarrassing. That's an embarrassment to journalism. What's so ridiculous about the fake news narrative that Donald Trump has been so successful at selling to his cult is he is the fake news. He is the Lügenpresse. Fox News is fake news. It's crazy that Fox News is a couple letters away from literally being faux news, F-A-U-X news. It's so fucking unsubtle and on the nose. I talk about this all the time on this podcast, what an unsubtle era we live in. But it's so crazy to go around being like, you can't trust mainstream media, and to be hearing that message from pundits on mainstream media, on Fox News, to have Greg Gutfeld and Tucker Carlson before he was fired, and Bill O'Reilly before he was fired, and Laura Loomer and all of these people on Fox News telling you, don't trust the mainstream media, and they are the mainstream media who you should not trust. But it's working. The goal is to eliminate all dissident voices in the media except for the loyalist ones. Make no mistake, this isn't just me with my tinfoil hat on. It's happening right before your eyes. I'm not just a climate scientist projecting something that could happen 30 years out in the future. I'm showing you a video of an iceberg collapsing right before your eyes. You can see it. They don't want dissidents in the media. They want loyalists like Charlie Kirk who say ridiculous shit like this.
Honestly, I'm done talking about Epstein for the time being. I'm going to trust my friends in the administration. I'm going to trust my friends in the government to do what needs to be done, solve it, balls in their hands. I've said plenty this last weekend.
That's who they want you to get all your information from, is that fucking guy, that fucking Gorgon. That absolute golem of a human being is who they want you to get all your information from. Is somebody that says, it doesn't matter that Trump has more pictures with Jeffrey Epstein than most people have with any other human being. I genuinely think Trump has more pictures of him and Jeffrey Epstein than my girlfriend and I have. I think than my family members and I have. I think it's crazy how often those two are photographed together, and they just want you to get your information from Charlie Kirk saying, don't worry about it. Saying, even though we've been telling you that we're the ones who care about protecting kids from drag queens reading them stories, don't worry about the fact that Donald Trump is 100% for sure guilty of child rape. Don't worry about that. That's who they want you getting your information from, and they're pulling it off is the shitty thing. This Colbert thing really rattled me because if they can do it to Colbert, if they can do it to NPR and PBS, they absolutely can do it to anybody. They can do it to me. I'm not trying to overblow my position in the culture. I understand the size of my influence and the size of my platform. I know that it's modest relative to a person like Stephen Colbert. It's modest relative to other content creators on the internet. I know who I am and what I'm able to affect and what my position is in the culture, but I also know that it's not a completely insignificant contribution. I know that it's not valueless. I know that the reason why I'm able to do this as my job full time is because it is a platform and an amount of influence that does have some kind of value to it. I've always known that my attachment to platforms like TikTok and Instagram and YouTube was very tenuous and very fickle and very fragile at best. That there was only so much control I had over it because most of it is just driven by an algorithm that nobody understands. I definitely don't understand it. A lot of my friends are full-time content creators, and I've never met a single person who stands these algorithms. I've met people who work at these companies and they don't understand how they work. From 2017 or 2020, I guess, when Trump first started saying we should ban TikTok because TikTok was hurting him in the polls for the 2020 election. When he first started saying that, I first started realizing, I have so little control over this. It's cool that there are people here who follow me, who find value in what I do, but I have no control over how long I get to do it or the reach that I have. It's all up to the whims of an algorithm. And now the government is saying they can just take it away willy-nilly if they want to. And make no mistake, when they turned the lights off on TikTok in January of this year, of 2025, for 12 hours, that was a deliberate warning. They were saying, we can do this anytime we want, and we will do this if we find that it is politically expedient for us to do it. As much as, I continue to play my part in the resistance to this fascist takeover, I'm also aware of how... Wow. As I was saying this, I just got banned from going live on TikTok. I just got it. This is, again, I always say we live in a very unsubtle world. As I'm talking about how tenuous and fragile my grasp on these platforms is, that my foothold on these platforms is, I got banned from going live on TikTok. Wow. That is so incredibly on the nose that as I'm talking about the attack on free speech, the attack on a free press, the attack on the dissemination of information, and how I want to try to funnel people over to a different platform, I get banned from going live on TikTok, so I can't even finish the message. I didn't even get to my pitch that I was going to make in this video. They banned me before I could even get to it. Boy, if that doesn't prove the thesis of this video, I don't know what does. They said that I was getting banned for misinformation. I was banned because I'm the fake news. I'm the lying press. I was spreading misinformation, even though I haven't said a single thing in this episode so far that is untrue as far as I'm concerned. I think everything that I've said can be fact-checked and verified. Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong, but this is the exact thing that I'm talking about. I did appeal and let them know that I don't believe that is the case. Sometimes my appeals are held up, sometimes they aren't. We'll find out which one this is, but it's a pretty big bummer that all the people watching aren't going to get to hear what I was hoping to say with this episode. But here we go. There is a Nobel Laureate Peace Prize award-winning journalist from the Philippines named Maria Ressa, who was a journalist at the time of the rise of Duterte and everything that was going on with that regime. She has been interviewed several times about what it means to be a journalist in a country that is growing increasingly fascistic, increasingly authoritarian, increasingly violent, increasingly totalitarian, and increasingly divided. A country where the government is directly attacking the press. What advice she would give to anyone whose country is going through something similar. And she has said multiple times that one of the key elements of resisting is you cannot ever cede any ground to them.
What Americans lose today, they are not going to be able to claw back easily, at least if you look at our experience in the Philippines. What are the tactics that they use? Social media to attack bottom up. You say a lie a million times, it becomes a fact, right? Okay, all of that is bleak, but I'm in Columbia University. I'm in New York City right now, while the former president who tried to jail me, Duterte, was arrested in March for crimes against humanity and is now at The Hague in prison. It was step by step, civil society coming together, realizing that you have to, and this was our rallying cry, hold the line. Hold the line on your rights. Because when you are silent, silence becomes complicity. When you hold the line, you do not voluntarily give up your rights.
And that's the problem with what CBS did in this settlement with Trump is they are ceding ground to the government and saying, okay, we'll back off. We'll let you call the shots. What you're doing when you do that is you're setting the precedent that you can sue us for lying in an interview where we were not lying, and you can win, which means that in the future, we're going to have to think twice before we edit videos just to make them more succinct and make our shows more watchable. And we're going to have to think twice before we air content that is critical of the administration. Firing Stephen Colbert is a message to all the networks, to NBC, to ABC, to CNN, to all the major mainstream networks that you can lose your show. You can lose your foothold in the cultural conversation for speaking out against this administration. And what Maria Ressa always says is you cannot willingly, voluntarily give up your rights. You have to make them come and take them. So basically what she's saying is what CBS should have done is said, if you want us to retract the story and you want us to pay you out, whatever it was he was suing them for, you're going to have to beat us in court and force us to do it. You're going to have to make your case in court and you're going to have to take it from our unwilling hands. But what she says is you cannot give away your rights as a journalist willingly, voluntarily, because once you do, you will never get them back. And it is that fragile. It is that fickle. We take it for granted. We take for granted the idea that there are a lot of people with access to a big audience and a platform who are spreading good information and who are telling the truth. And we take that for granted, but it can all be taken away from us. This whole, the fact that I just got banned on TikTok as I was talking about this is just so right on the nose. And that's why I want to talk about Patreon, and specifically what I'm doing with my personal Patreon right now, and what I'm going to urge my other friends, my other content creator friends who have Patreon to do with their Patreon platforms. Because social media was supposed to be the promise of social media, the promise of new media was supposed to be the democratization of information and of political discourse, socio-political discourse. What I mean by that is when all of the information, well, there's the invention of the printing press, right? And we can print books and we can print newspapers and we can sort of get ideas and thoughts and opinions out into the populace that way. But what gets printed, what gets pressed, what gets disseminated is still kind of, it's going to be at the whims of the highest bidder, right? Like whoever can afford to have their words and their thoughts pressed in a printing press is going to have first access to have their words and thoughts and opinions pressed and disseminated. And then how many copies of your words and thoughts get pushed out there, again, is going to be a matter of how much money and how much influence you're able to accrue in order to push that out there. Newspapers exist on the money of sponsors and advertisers, and those advertisers are going to have requests like, can you once in a while have stories that are favorable to our product so that we'll continue to fund your operation? And they would sort of do these deals with the devil that are sort of necessary. I do them as a social media content creator, where it's like, in order to continue doing good journalism and posting stories, writing stories that we think matter and we think are useful, every once in a while we got to do a puff piece for one of our corporate sponsors so that we can keep the operation afloat and continue to pay our writers and our editors, because making an international newspaper is not cheap. And then the television comes along. And again, this is like supposed to be a cultural revolution where everyone's got access to all the same information. This can be broadcast globally. People can see news reports about things that are happening almost instantaneously. But again, what's being fed to you, the information that you get to consume through your TV, you don't really control it. You don't really get a choice over it. The moneyed interests at NBC, ABC, and CBS, they're the ones who are going to control what information gets shared to you through their programs. And perhaps more importantly, they're going to control what information doesn't get shared with you. And as a society under that paradigm, we just sort of have to put our faith in the general concept of journalistic integrity and say, yeah, there's definitely going to be some tampering from corporate sponsors with the news and stuff. But in general, I'd like to believe that there are people who get into the career of journalism because at the core, in their heart, they believe in the power of information. They believe in sharing good, necessary, true, honest information about what's going on in the world. And even if, 25% of it or even like 15% of it isn't very good or reliable or solid or necessary information, the bulk of it, is actually good for me. Even if it's like 60%, most of it. And I people try to get good at developing their bullshit meter of like deciding which stories to care about and which stories to maybe not worry about so much. But at the end of the day, like, you're not controlling what information you latch onto, what information you deem valuable. That decision is being made for you by the people who control the networks, right? The internet comes along, and within about 10 years of the internet being a thing, once we figured out websites and email, social media starts to develop a little after 10 years. We start to be able to have access to just ordinary people, and it's kind of like public access television stations, but everyone has the ability to have their own public access television show. The idea of the era is that it's going to democratize this dissemination of information. It's going to mean that you, the viewer, the consumer, finally, at long last, get to choose what you watch and when you watch it, which information you find to be credible and valuable, and which information you find to be ridiculous and not worth your time, and that power is in your hands. You get to choose who you subscribe to, who you follow, which channels you want to put, notifications on for because you value what they say that much. And the power is now in your hands. There's no corporation that's deciding what information you're going to watch. You get to decide. That was the promise of social media. And to a certain extent, some of that sort of exists, right? You're scrolling around on your For You page on TikTok or scrolling around on your feed on Instagram. You find an account that you find funny or entertaining or useful in some way, and you make the decision, I'm going to follow this account. The problem is, and always has been, it's not like once you follow someone's account, every time you open your phone, you're notified that that person has made some new content. And you're given the option, you're given the choice, do I want to watch the new content from this channel that I followed or not? What's being put in front of you every time you open Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, YouTube, TikTok is just on the whims of the algorithm still. Even if you're going to your following tab on TikTok, the algorithm is still choosing which videos from the people you're following to put in front of you and which ones to not put in front of you. And I can tell you as a person who's been doing this for 5 years full time, the vast majority of the videos that I make are not put in front of the vast majority of people who have chosen to follow me. In fact, when I make a new video for TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube, there's a much higher statistical likelihood that it will not be shown to most of the people who have made the decision to subscribe to my YouTube channel or to follow me on Instagram or TikTok. Most of those people aren't going to be aware that I've shared some new information. And if they're not made aware that I have a new video out, then they're not given the choice to engage with that video or not. The choice is made for them by the algorithm. So this idea of the democratization of the dissemination of information, I know that's a lot of Asian words in a row, but this idea of the choice finally being put in your hands and the people taking the power back is largely an illusion for several reasons. A, in order for me to be viable as a full-time content creator, in order for me to do this as my job, I still have to make many of the same deals with the devil that lots of newspapers and news outlets for the last 150, 200 years have had to do, because you've got to fund the operation, right? And so I try my best to partner with ethical partners and sponsors and only do brand deals with people who, for the most part, I agree with what they're selling. I get a lot of shit when I do ads for BetterHelp. This is not an ad for BetterHelp. This is just a hydro jug that BetterHelp gave me because I've partnered with them for the last few years. But there are a lot of people in my audience that go, oh, I wish you wouldn't partner with them because they've done some unethical things here, here, and here. And I'm not arguing with those people, but I'm just saying, listen, I don't actually have the luxury of hand-picking which sponsors want to partner with me and which ones don't. If I did, that would be great, but almost nobody who does my job is in that position. All I can really do is be there's certain brands that I will never partner with on moral and ethical bases. And then there are other brands that they might not be 100% perfect, but I gotta pay my rent. And at the end of the day, BetterHelp's an organization that at their core, all they're trying to do is make therapy accessible for people. And, therapy, at any level, getting into therapy, there's a risk there. You might get a therapist who works for you. You might get a therapist who you really don't vibe with and who really doesn't work for you. You might get a therapist who you think is working for you, but then it turns out that the advice they're giving is actually really harmful. That's what happened with Jodi Hildebrand and pretty much any person who ever worked with her. It all culminated and climaxed with Ruby Franke. Ruby Franke thought thought Jodi Hildebrand was saving her family. And in fact, Jodi Hildebrand was destroying her family. It's a risk to sort of let someone come in and have the wheel of your psychological health. And again, this is not me doing an ad read. It's just me talking about how I've justified partnering with different brands over the years. But the number one way that I justify it is I have to make money. I have to have revenue streams. In order to keep this alive, in order to keep doing this as my job, I have to find a way to monetize it. So I'm not completely, detached, no strings. I'm definitely still, like the value of my platform is in how many people I'm able to reach on a week-to-week basis, on a month-to-month basis, on a day-to-day basis. And brands see that, and that's how they determine what they'd be willing to pay me for a sponsored post. But the other reason why, social media platforms being kind of a democratization of information is kind of an illusion is this TikTok ban that happened. Like, at the end of the day, we don't control these platforms. We are not shareholders in these platforms. We don't get to call the shots on how these platforms are operated. We don't have any idea how or why the algorithm does the things it does. We don't have any control over when these algorithms decide arbitrarily to just ban us. So your favorite account that you're following and that you love getting updates from and that you feel like is really reliable and has a lot of integrity and has a lot of value, they can just get banned by TikTok or banned by Meta. Every single person I know that does this full time has had videos demonetized, taken down, has had their accounts, paused and suspended for certain amounts of time for nothing, for things that like they genuinely did not do, or just because they were sharing information that whoever's in charge of the company did not want them sharing. And obviously, that's a massive problem because sure, you've got the choice to follow someone like me or someone else that you find valuable or interesting or funny or useful in your day-to-day life, but you don't have the choice of when that person's access to income is going to be taken away by the platforms that they exist on. When YouTube is going to decide to demonetize their video and not, accept their appeals. When TikTok is going to decide to ban them from going live or to suspend their account. When Meta is going to randomly decide that they no longer have to pay them for the views that they get on a viral reel. You don't get any say in that. And these channels that you like, that you find valuable, could go away really easily, the same way that NPR and PBS and Stephen Colbert are going away. And so again, Patreon. I've been on Patreon for 3, close to 4 years now. And in that time, hundreds of people who follow me on social media have come and gone. And I'm so thankful to every one of those people. From the bottom of my heart, I really just can't thank them enough. But different people over those 3 or 4 years have come to support for a while. And then sometimes they have to back off when they can't afford it anymore. Some people have been there the entire time. That's amazing. Some people are just getting there for the first time now. That's also amazing. The point is, I've always seen value in the model of Patreon. I've always seen it as like, boy, if I could get that going, if I could get that to work, then I could really have a foothold in something that feels a little bit more secure than Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok and Threads, where it feels like we're building a community and an area for content and for information that we're actually choosing and that we actually have a say in. The difference between Patreon and TikTok and Instagram and YouTube is not only that stuff exists behind a paywall, but like when I post there, if you're subscribed to my Patreon, you will know that I've made a new post. You will get an email update and a notification that I've made a new post, and you get to make the choice whether you want to watch that post or not, whether you want to engage with that post or not. But that choice isn't going to be taken from you. It's not going to be made for you by the algorithm. So I've always seen that there's a lot of value in this model. I've just never been able to figure it out. And all of my friends that do this full time have had similar problems. Like, we talk about it all the time, that it's like, I would love to make Patreon my top priority. I would love to make that the number one place where I'm posting and where I'm giving like my biggest effort, but we're all bumping on this cost benefit analysis that keeps us from doing that. Mine goes like this, and it's similar with my other friends. I have close to 1.7 million people that follow me across TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. My videos on those different platforms regularly get hundreds of thousands and often millions of views. So my reach on those platforms is just much, much, much higher than what it is over on Patreon, because right now I have like 250 Patreon subscribers. And usually when I post a video to Patreon, like 30 to 50 people watch it and like 3 people comment on it. And even though those people are paying me monthly, so they should be extra special and extra prioritized, I still am like, okay, but what's the point of investing time and energy into making quality content if it's only reaching an audience of like 30 people every time I do it? Am I actually having an effect on the cultural narrative? Am I actually doing my part to fight back? Because I really do believe that there are different jobs that different people have when it comes to pushing back against fascist totalitarian regimes. There are soldiers who are willing to put their physical body on the line and match physical force with physical force, and that is a necessary role. There are commanders and generals who are the organizers. You know, they organize protests, they organize boycotts, they organize systematized rebellions against systems and organizations and corporations that are contributing to their oppression. And there are the storytellers. There are the people who are, journalists and people who are helping to craft the narrative and helping to spread information. There's, the people on the radio, the people on the TV, the people writing the newspaper articles, and in this day and age, social media content creators. And it's not that my influence, again, is on the same level as like a Stephen Colbert or a PBS or an NPR, but I have the same job that they have when it comes to my role in the resistance, my role in pushing back. And I take that job and that responsibility really seriously. And again, in order for me to continue doing that, in order for me to do that meaningfully, in order for my contribution to have value, I need to cast a wide net. I need to be able to reach a lot of people. And so far, the best way for me to reach the most people is through TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. So here's my big announcement. Here's the thing that I want to, this is the headline. The headline is my Patreon is now $1 a month. I just want to make my Patreon accessible to anyone at any level. I mean, before this, my lowest entry was $4 a month, and I felt like that was really reasonable. And I think most people, a lot of people can afford $4 a month, probably. But when you scale it out to an entire year, that's like $50 a year. And then if you want to support multiple channels that you find value in, and let's say you want to support 10 different channels every year, that's $500 a year. And the way that most people operate on their Patreons, a lot of my friends who have Patreon, is like, they're not posting a lot of extra stuff there. It's kind of like everything that they post to YouTube, everything that they post to TikTok, maybe they post it a day early on Patreon. So the Patreon patrons get it earlier than everybody else, but it's still like, you're still basically getting all the same stuff that's going to the other platforms for free. What I want to do is post the bulk of my content on Patreon. I want to completely flip my model all around and prioritize Patreon and put it at the top. It's going to get the first posting of every video I make. It's going to get bonus content, longer versions of the videos, often BTS footage. It's going to get the kinds of videos that I want to make regularly, but that I don't think the algorithm will prioritize, so I don't bother making. So it's not that I'm going to completely stop posting on platforms like YouTube or Instagram or TikTok. It's just that I'm going to post everything that I normally post on all those other platforms to Patreon first with bonus content. And I'm also going to be posting a lot of Patreon exclusive content that doesn't get posted anywhere else. So it's going to be kind of like my number one place. And the barrier to entry is going to be much, much, much less of an obstacle. It's just $1 a month, $12 a year. And for $12 a year, you can be a member over there and get all of that exclusive content, all of that early content. I just want to make it a really like no-brainer, easy decision for people. Because even though Patreon's not like a fix-all for the problem of, we don't actually at the end of the day control these things because the government could just, I guess, eventually shut off the internet. It does feel like Patreon is a place where we can have more of a foothold in case they shut off TikTok, in case they shut off Instagram, in case they ban my accounts from these platforms. If you find this work valuable, if you enjoy the content that I make and you find it useful and you want to support creators like me, what I want to do is, behind a very, very modest, very simple paywall, be able to create something that we have more say in, that doesn't rob us of our choice, where you're actually getting to make the choice. I want to contribute to this kind of information, this kind of storytelling, this kind of content, and I want to meaningfully participate in it. And when this person posts new videos, I want to know about it. I don't want to leave it up to the algorithm. I want to make the choice about where I'm getting my information. And, if this works out for me, if this winds up being a successful experiment, I'm going to tell every single content creator I know that has Patreon to do the same thing and just say, make your lowest subscription very, very, very affordable. Let's make it so that people can support a lot of different channels, so that people can be supporting 10 to 20 different channels a month, and, making sure that like the resistance has a viable shot at staying vibrant and continuing to get their message out there. Because right now, I'll be completely honest with you, cards on the table, the biggest difference between me and Tim Pool and Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro is money. They are so much better funded than your average left-leaning progressive content creator. People like me are often doing our shows from our bedrooms. This is my bedroom. I live in a one-bedroom apartment. I say it at the beginning of every single episode of the show. I live very modestly. Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro and Tim Pool are millionaires, multimillionaires, and they're so well-funded and their message has such a bigger reach. Joe Rogan is a multimillionaire and he has such a bigger reach because of money at the end of the day. Another very important role that people play in resisting fascism is financial support for the resistance. The resistance needs funding. And here's the thing. Here's the real, honest, brutal thing. Your money is already funding your oppression. Your money is going toward the cancellation of PBS and NPR. Your tax dollars are funding the government that is behind Stephen Colbert's show getting canceled. Your tax dollars are funding Israel and the IDF and the genocide of the Palestinian people. Whether you like it or not, your money is already heavily funding this massive force, this massively powerful force that is rising up. If you understand that and you care about that and you understand the value that I'm trying to talk about here, the value of a free press, I think $1 a month is a very simple, kind of a no-brainer ask. And I want to make it that way because I want to make it something that everyone can easily say yes to. I want to make it something that everyone can go, man, if my tax dollars are funding, an organization that wants to take healthcare away from, a governmental administration that wants to strip healthcare away from millions of people so that they can give tax breaks to billionaires. If my tax dollars are just going to making billionaires richer while the infrastructure of my country falls apart, and if my tax dollars are going to bombing children in the Middle East, the very least I could do is throw a little bit of money to offset that cost toward the resistance. It's kind of like, knowing that being a consumer in the modern world means most likely in some way, shape, or form, you're contributing to climate change. You're contributing to industrialization. It's really, really hard to leave absolutely no carbon footprint while participating in the global economy in any significant way. And so what a lot of people do is they try to engage in behaviors that offset their participation in that system, that offset their carbon footprint. And they say, okay, if I have this sort of unavoidable carbon footprint, then I'll be really committed to recycling, and I'll be really, really committed to donating to organizations that are planting trees, and I'll be really committed to doing everything I can to offset the contribution I'm already making to the heat death of the planet. And I think this thing operates the same way, where it's like, you're already funding the regime that is actively taking away your access to a free press that has integrity, that has your best interests at heart. You're already funding them taking that away. I think it makes sense to offset that by funding the resistance a little bit. And I want to make doing that an easy ask for you. So that's why I've changed my Patreon. It was $4, $7, and $10, and I've changed it to $1, $2, and $5. At $1 and $2, there is no change. It's just like, you can pay $2 a month if you want. That's amazing. If you feel like you're capable of paying me $24 a year, and you feel like that's a thing you can comfortably budget, then by all means sign up at $2. But if all you feel like you want to contribute is $12, I totally understand. I want you to have extra money left over to support other channels as well in the same way. And $5, there is a perk. The people who are contributing at $5 a month will do a quarterly hangout. So every 3 months, we'll get together and do a digital quarterly hangout with like a Q&A, a check-in, just seeing how everybody's doing. And we'll try to, focus on community building and helping each other through this kind of very difficult, very bleak time. But I really do believe that this is an important part of resistance. I'm not just, I get how selfish and self-serving this sounds, and that's because on a certain level, it is. I want to keep my job. I want to keep doing this work, and in order to do that, I just need help. And I think the way that I can do it with the most integrity and the way that I can do it with the most authenticity and be the most honest is this way. If I have to continue relying solely on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, I'm going to have to continue dealing with TikTok's shenanigans, like banning me from Alive for talking about the dangers of the rise of fascism and totalitarianism. I'm going to have to keep dealing with YouTube and Instagram just deciding on whims that they're not going to pay me for the views that I get on their platforms. I'm going to have to keep dealing with, making deals with brands and sponsors and partners that I maybe don't fully align with, but I'm just like, well, I got to pay rent. But if we do it this way, where the people who are primarily funding what I'm doing are people who believe in what I'm doing, who believe in the value of what I'm doing, who are choosing to trust me, I really do believe that that gives us a better foothold, and it gives us more ownership at the end of the day over this whole thing. With all of these different roles that people play in resisting, this is one of them that's really important. I believe that the 250 people who are already subscribed to my Patreon are doing important work because they're helping me keep this alive, and they're helping me do my job as a guy who yaps, as a guy who talks, a guy who tries my hardest to get important information out there, accurate information, honest information, useful information, valuable information. Because make no mistake, they are coming for that. They want to shut people like me down. They want to shut down my channels. They want to shut down your access to me. And what I'm trying to offer you here is exclusive access to everything I have to offer at a very, very, very simple, easy price. I'm just paring it way down and just going, you know what? I want everyone who wants to be able to be a part of my Patreon community. I don't want anyone to feel like it's out of their price range. I understand, of course, if you can't do that. I think it's totally reasonable if you just don't want to, but I want to see if this works. I feel like this is a way for us to kind of say, fuck you to these bigger corporations that are, don't really have our best interests at heart and don't really want us to be building community like this and are in the process of trying to strip away our access to opportunities to build community like this. So that's why I'm making this move. I'm excited about it. I'm scared about it. I hope it works out. If it does work out, I'm so excited about what it means for the future of the kind of content that I can make. If my content is primarily funded by all of you going forward, it's going to change so much about how we can communicate and like the freedom and the authenticity, the integrity with which we can communicate. And that's what I want at the end of the day. I want the freedom to be able to focus on just making the best possible content for you. Patreon feels like a place where we can build something that we are actively choosing. I get to make the kind of content I want to make and make it at the level that I want to make it. And I get to make it for people who I know are choosing to be a part of this, who are choosing to trust me. And so that's what I'm asking. It's $1 a month. Link in the description, patreon.com/Austin Archer. Shout out to all of my existing patrons. I hope many more of you join us in the coming days and weeks. And I hope to see you over there. This is an experiment that I hope it works out. And that's kind of it. That's my spiel. I hope you understand what I'm pitching here and that, I do see value in it beyond just making sure I can have a job. I think that it's not just about me. It's about everybody who's trying to do this job. It's about NPR. It's about PBS. It's about Stephen Colbert. It's about all of your other favorite content creators. We need to fight for this. We need to fight for our access to this information. We need to fight to protect free speech. We need to fight for our voice in this turbulent time. So I hope you'll join me. I hope you'll consider it at the very least. Okay, that's the episode. I would normally do the TikTok talkback with the TikTok Digital Studio audience, but I can't do that obviously right now. So that's the episode. And we'll see you next time. People Pleaser is written, edited, hosted, and produced by me, Austin Archer. I'm a one-man show. All the more reason that I really need all the revenue I can get to keep this operation alive. You can find more of my music by going to austin-archer.com, Austin Archer on Spotify, Austin Archer wherever you stream music. And check that out if you like indie music, austinarchermusic.bandcamp.com if you want to buy some of my music and support the channel that way. All of those things are linked in the bio. Okay, that's pretty much it. Subscribe to the Wonder Podcast. That's my other podcast where I just talk about movies. If you ever just want to hear me talking about something a little more lighthearted, that's a really fun show. Again, linked in the description. Okay, we'll see you next time. Thank you for indulging me on this episode and listening to what I have to say. I love you so much. Until then, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. All right. Bye-bye.